Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I want to talk about the French classic authors. I am obsessed with French literature, it's my absolute favorite, and I've been meaning to do a video like this for such a long time, but I never got to it because I always felt like I wasn't ready. There were so many authors on my list that I still had to read, and thus I never felt ready. But now I kinda do. I still have to read some authors, of course, on my list, but I think I am ready to give you advice. So today we will go over novels, short stories, novellas, theater plays, and poetry. There are some huge stacks of books behind me on the couch, and I want to go over them all. I've never used so many books in a video before. And so the translations that I usually get are either the Penguin Classics or the Oxford World's Classics editions. I've never had any issues with those translations and I really love them. Alright, so the first stack of books. First, I want to go over authors that I think are great to start with, even if you're not familiar with reading older books. So this is a stack of French authors that I think are perfect for beginners in classic lit. The first novel I want to show you is Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. This is an excellent novel. It is easy to follow. The writing style is flowery but not difficult to read, and it is a slower story, so if you like action-packed novels, then this might not be the perfect read for you. I also want to read you the summary on the back of the books because I think that's going to give you a better view of what the story is about, and it's going to be better than me explaining what it is about. So, Madame Bovary is: the realities of married life in a provincial town fall a long way short of Emma Bovary's romantic expectations. To fill the void, she embarks on reckless affairs and impetuous spending on the luxuries that she dreamt of. But when her debts are called in, Emma must face reality, and the consequences are tragic. I think this one is comparable to Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, so if you love that one, then I highly recommend picking up Madame Bovary. Now, if you want to give Gustave Flaubert a try, but you don't want to commit to a novel just yet, because he also wrote L'éducation sentimentale, which is a sentimental education, and this is a bit more difficult to get into, so I wouldn't recommend it as a first read. But he did write, there's something in my eye, hair of my cat, no doubt. So he also wrote short stories. I have read one of him, which was called Un Coeur simple, which is a simple heart in English, and you could start with a short story by Flaubert just to get used to his writing style. But I wouldn't start with a sentimental education. The next author on my list is Émile Zola. The first book that I've ever read of him was Thérèse Raquin. I was so addicted to this book, and look at how thin it is. I've recommended it on my channel before, and I highly recommend picking this up, especially as a first read by Zola. Also, the translation is phenomenal. It gave me shivers. It is very gloomy and dark and tragic, so if you love those vibes, then I highly recommend trying Thérèse Raquin. In a dingy apartment on the Passage du Pont-Neuf in Paris, Thérèse Raquin is trapped in a loveless marriage to her sickly cousin Camille. The numbing tedium of her life is suddenly shattered when she embarks on a turbulent affair with her husband's earthly friend, Laurent. But their animal passion for each other soon compels the lovers to commit a crime that will haunt them forever. This book caused a scandal when it was first published, and I can definitely see why. Of course, he has written many other works, like, for example, Germinal, which I'm currently reading. I'm at chapter 3, so I cannot say much about it, but I also feel like it's a good one to start with, but it's a bit bigger. But I'd say start with Thérèse Raquin. The next author I love and want to show you is Guy de Maupassant. I've read his novel Bel-Ami, and then I picked up his short stories, and these absolutely blew me away. If you love reading short stories from time to time and you want to get to know Guy de Maupassant, his style, which is brilliant, then I highly recommend picking up one of his short stories. If you need an example of one to start with, you can start with The Necklace. And next I have a very famous one. It is Gaston Leroux, who has written The Phantom of the Opera. You probably already know the story from the musical. This is a very easy one to get into. It's easy to read. His style is very simple. So let me read the back. A hideously disfigured composer who lives in seclusion beneath the Paris Opera House becomes a Svengali figure to young singer Christine Daae, molding her into a star performer. But his obsessive love for Christine is unrequited, and when he fears she will be lost to him, his jealousy endangers everyone. Not a big one and very easy to read. The next author on my list is one that I am not particularly fond of because his style is very simple, a bit too simple. I like flowery language and beautiful sentences, and you're not immediately going to find that with Jules Verne. I read a couple of his stories and most of them I did not finish. This one is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I think you should definitely give his works a try because they're really not hard to read. And if you love adventure kind of stories, then I think you might like them. The next author I have is Stendhal. This is The Red and the Black, Le Rouge et le Noir. And I have read volume 1. This book comes in 2 volumes. I've read volume 1, but I didn't like it enough to proceed with volume 2. The style is very easy to read. The story is very slow. So this book is about a handsome, ambitious man called Julien Sorel, and he is determined to rise above his humble provincial origins. He soon realizes that success can only be achieved by adopting the subtle code of hypocrisy by which society operates, and he begins to achieve advancement through deceit and self-interest. All right, let me get the second stack. Oh, this is so exciting. Okay, so the next author is one of my... Well, the author isn't one of my favorites, but the book is one of my favorites. It's The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This, as you can see, is a brick. However, I would recommend it to a beginner because the style isn't difficult. It flows, keeps you on the edge of your seat, and you do not want to stop reading. It's a very addictive work. If you struggle with bigger books, which I understand, I would recommend... Where is it? I put it on the wrong stack. Damn it. All right, I'm back. So, if you struggle with bigger books and you want to give Alexandre Dumas a try, but you do not want to commit to 1,000 pages, which I understand, The Black Tulip. I love this one so much, and I did not expect to like it that much. This is the Oxford World's Classic Edition. Oh gosh, I'm struggling. It's very thin, so you will get through it in no time. Kept me on the edge of my seat. It was so exciting to read, which I did not expect because the first chapters were kind of difficult, and I needed to do some background research. So I recommend doing some background research for those few first chapters and then diving into the story because it will pick up very quickly. Now look at this cover. It's so pretty. And I realized I forgot to tell you what The Count of Monte Cristo is about. So let's do the Count first. Thrown in prison for a crime he had not committed, Edmond Dantès is confined to the grim fortress of If. There he learns of a great hoard of treasure hidden on the Isle of Monte Cristo, and he becomes determined not only to escape, but also to unearth the treasure and use it to plot the destruction of the 3 men responsible for his imprisonment. This is such an epic tale. Cannot recommend it enough. Now, The Black Tulip, if you decide to pick this one up, this is set in Holland in 1672, and it weaves the historical events surrounding the brutal murder of John de Witte and his brother Cornelius into a tale of romantic love. The novel is also a timeless political allegory in which Dumas, drawing on the violence and crimes of history, makes his case against tyranny and puts all his energies into creating a symbol of justice and tolerance. I loved it. Cannot recommend it enough. Now, if you love adventure novels, I could also recommend you The Three Musketeers, of course. This was my least favorite book until now. I've read part 2, recently finished 20 Years After, which is the second part in the series, and I enjoyed it more than part 1. But this is such a beloved novel, and you should definitely give it a try if you love adventure novels. So it depends on what kind of novel you're interested in, and then you should go from there. My next recommendation is a female author. She wrote under her pen name George Sand, and one of her novels is called Indiana. This one is easy to read, the storyline is easy to follow, and the writing style is very accessible and beautiful at the same time. This tells a story of a beautiful and innocent young woman who was married at 16 to a much older man. She falls passionately in love with a handsome, frivolous neighbor, but discovers too late that his idea of love is quite different from her own. It is only after a series of painful experiences that she comes to appreciate the silent devotion of her loyal and protective cousin. Highly recommend. George Sand was also a friend of Gustave Flaubert, so if you can couple those two reads together, that would be absolutely amazing. And finally, I have The Nun by Denis Diderot. I finished this one recently, and I liked it more than I thought I would. It was beautifully written, but not in a poetic way. Very accessible. The story is easy to follow, and here we follow the story of a young girl who was forced by her parents to enter a convent. This novel mingles mysticism, madness, sadistic cruelty, and it gives an insight into the effects of forced vocations and the unnatural life of the convent. This is the French edition, which is called La Religieuse. Alright, now I want to dive into books that are a little more difficult to consume. By this I mean that they are written in a more poetic way, that you will have to maybe read sentences again or chapters again, that you will need more time to digest the story, that it has more characters, or that the pacing is very slow. Some of these novels also require a bit of background research to understand the time period or the problems that were going on at the time. The first author I want to show you is Honoré de Balzac. This is one of my favorites. I think his writing style is absolutely brilliant, stunning. His sentences are just chef's kiss. And he has written a lot, so I haven't read everything yet, but I know that he's one of my favorites and he will always be one of my favorites. So far, I have read Lost Illusions. I think this is The Lily of the Valley in English. I've read his short story Sarrassine, and I have read Cousin Bette. There are 2 books on my shelf, which I still have to read. Old Man Goriot and Eugénie Grandet. I've heard that Old Man Goriot is a very good one to start with, probably because it's very thin, but Eugénie Grandet is also a thin one, maybe a good one to start with, but I cannot give you advice on these because I haven't read them yet. As for Cousin Bette, the pacing is decent, it's not too slow, so let me tell you what this is about. Compelled to live in the condescending patronage of her socially superior relatives, the Hulot family, Cousin Bette's energies are directed wholly towards their destruction. The bitter conflict which ensues embodies the struggle for survival of the old values against the rising tide of the new. So this is a novel about a woman who wants to destroy the family that she's a part of. I also did a review on the channel, so if you're interested, go and check that out. As for The Lily of the Valley, this is a very slow, poetic read. So if you love beautiful sentences and you don't need a very engaging storyline, but you just enjoy prose, then The Lily of the Valley is a very good one. It's also a very romantic read. As for Lost Illusions, this is a more difficult one to recommend because it was a very slow read. It has beautiful sentences. I've made so many annotations and I really enjoyed the story overall, but I found that there were parts that were very dragging, very difficult to get through. So this is about a handsome poet called Lucien Chardon. He is poor, he is naive, but highly ambitious, and he fails to make his name in the dull provincial hometown, and so he is taken up by a patroness, the captivating married woman Madame de Barcheton, and prepares to forge his way in the glamorous beau monde of Paris. But Lucien has entered a world far more dangerous than he realizes, as Madame de Barcheton's reputation becomes compromised and the fickle, venomous denizens of the courts and salons conspire to keep him out of their ranks. Lucien eventually learns that wherever he goes, talent counts for nothing in comparison to money and intrigue. Alright, next I have Victor Hugo. He is my favorite French author of all time. Of course, I didn't grab all of the books that I have on the shelf. That would be absolutely insane. But yeah, he has also written quite a lot. His most famous novels are, of course, Les Misérables and Notre-Dame de Paris. If you are not afraid of reading big novels, then Les Misérables is a good one to start with. It's an absolute masterpiece. Make sure to get the unabridged version because it is worth every second of your time. This is about an ex-convict named Jean Valjean who served 19 years in prison for stealing bread and attempts to redeem his life by helping the downtrodden. But his every move is dodged by the implacable policeman Inspector Javert, whose relentless pursuit of a reformed criminal reflects a morally empty state that values retribution rather than justice. This novel has everything. It will keep you on the edge of your seat. It is full of action. It is full of romance. It is full of tragedy. I know it's a big one, but I promise you it will be worth your time. The next one, Notre-Dame de Paris, I would only recommend this one if you're used to reading older novels. This is very slow paced and it takes a while for the story to really get started. This was especially written to save the Cathedral of Notre-Dame in Paris, and luckily he succeeded. But there is a lot of attention to architecture and Notre-Dame itself. But once the story actually gets started, you will feel for the characters, you will be inside their head, you will care for their story. It is also a very tragic, dramatic story, so if you do not like those kind of stories, then this one will not be for you. But if you do like tragedy and drama and dark themes mixed with a beautiful, beautiful writing style, then this is for you. But I must emphasize that it is not an easy read, so prepare yourself. I will be doing a sort of guide on Notre-Dame de Paris because it's one of my favorite novels of all time, and I kind of want to talk about it in depth and maybe give some advice on how to get started, how to prepare yourself, and so on. I also really love The Man Who Laughs, but this one is even more difficult, I think, than Notre-Dame de Paris because there are even more, he digresses even more in The Man Who Laughs. If you look at the storyline without his digressions, it would be something like this. And I wonder why no one has thought of making like a decent movie of this story because it's so good. But I would recommend it if you have read Les Misérables and Notre-Dame, and if you love these two books, then I would recommend The Man Who Laughs. If you want to get used to Hugo's writing style, then you can also go for The Last Day of a Condemned Man, which is about a man who has been condemned to death. He gets his final sacraments, he's living his final days, he's saying goodbye to people he loves, and yeah, you get to live through all that. It's quite easy to read and it's very short. One of his other shorter novels is The Toilers of the Sea. I loved this story so much. And if you like stories that are taking place at sea and around sea, then you're going to love this. This is also, it has horror vibes. And I cannot tell you more because I will spoil it, but it has some horror elements and It's really good. Now, I need to charge my camera, but I will be back for part 2. All right, part 2. The next two authors have been an inspiration to Victor Hugo. I'm talking about Alphonse de Lamartine and René de Chateaubriand. I have read Raphael by Lamartine, and this is what the story is about. It is set in the 16th century of Italy, and the book tells the story of a painter, Raphael, and his lover, the noblewoman Margherita Lutti. The novel is a romantic and tragic tale of passion and betrayal, inspired by Lamartine's own experience of love and loss. And I can tell you, it is beautifully written. It is just so poetic. The sentences are perfect. As for Chateaubriand, I have read Atala, and Atala is a tragic tale of a young Native American woman named Atala who belongs to a tribe. She falls in love with a young Christian Frenchman named Jacques, who is in exile from Acadia, which is a former French colony in North America. The story is set in the American wilderness of colonial America during the 18th century. Religion plays a huge role in this novel, and I especially liked the descriptive poetic language, and it also has beautiful descriptions of nature. Now let's talk about some playwrights that you cannot skip. First of all, I have Jean de La Fontaine. Jean de La Fontaine was a playwright during Louis XIV, his reign, which was the Sun King at the court of Versailles. And he is most known for his fables. I've only read one, and yeah, he was an important author at that time. This must be, by the way, the most beautiful book that I have in my closet. I have 2 volumes, but I think there are 4 or 5. The next playwright, Molière, of course, and he was also very important at the court of Versailles. If you want to give his plays a try, then I suggest starting with The Misanthrope and Tartuffe. Don't be too intimidated because they are very accessible and easy to read. Next, I have Jean Racine, who is also a very important playwright at the time. And I have a huge edition of all of his works collected in French. It's obviously very heavy and I'm not going to be holding that up. So far, I have read Phaedra, and this play is about Phaedra, who is consumed with passion for Hippolytus, her stepson. Believing her husband dead, she confesses her love to him and is rebuffed. When her husband returns alive, Phaedra convinces him that it was Hippolytus who attempted to seduce her. And the final playwright that I would like to recommend is Pierre Corneille with for example, one of his most famous works, Le Cid. This is a tragic comedy that unfolds in the 17th century Spain, featuring themes of honor, love, and familial conflict. Then I want to discuss 2 more novelists. The first one is Voltaire. Of course, he cannot be absent on this list, and I highly recommend picking up Candide. Young nobleman Candide lives a sheltered life under the tutorship of absurd Dr. Pangloss, who espouses the prevailing philosophy of optimism. Following an indiscretion, Candide is cast out into the world which, according to Pangloss, is the best of all possible worlds. But this is not so. Candide and his companions encounter endless calamities in their madcap travels around the world, war crimes, earthquakes, and inquisitions, all based on real events of the 18th century. This is a short read and it is a satire, and I hope you will enjoy it. And the final author I want to discuss in this section is Marcel Proust. He wrote In Search of Lost Time. I have only read volume 1, Swan's Way, and I made an in-depth video about this work and the stream of consciousness style that this was written in. So if you're interested, go ahead and check that out. The Way by Swans is one of the great novels of childhood, depicting the impressions of a sensitive boy regarding his family and neighbors, brought dazzlingly back to life by the famous taste of a Madeleine. It also contains a separate short novel, a study of sexual jealousy that forms a crucial part of Proust's great masterpiece In Search of Lost Time. This is not an easy read, so if you're a beginner with the French classics, then I would not recommend reading this one. but I discussed this, as I said, in depth in one of my other videos. Okay, as for the final section, I have some authors that I want to recommend, but that I haven't read yet. These are still on my list, and I want to read them as soon as I can. The first one is Madame de Lafayette, and she has written La Princesse de Clèves, or The Princess of the Clèves. This is about impossible love at the French court. Next, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His most famous work is Confessions, which is a deeply personal and philosophical autobiography. This is a work that I already own by him, and it is called Les Rêveries du Promeneur Solitaire. I have no idea about the English title. Next, I have De Laclos. I have an English edition, which we will be reading for the book club next year. My gosh. And then I have a French edition, a beautiful French one. It is called Dangerous Lesions, and this is about the complex moral ambiguities of seduction and revenge. One of the most scandalous and controversial novels in European literature. Its prime movers, the Vicomte de Valmont and the Marquise de Merteuil, gifted, wealthy and bored, form an unholy alliance and turn seduction into a game which they must win. And they play with such wit and style that it is impossible not to admire them, until they discover that the game has mysterious rules that they cannot understand. In the ensuing vicious battle, there can be no victors, and the innocent will suffer with the guilty. This sounds so good. I cannot wait to read it. Next, I have Baudelaire. I have read, let me see, I have read his poems in prose. I do not like poetry that much, but his poems in prose absolutely blew me away, and I intend to do an audiobook version on the channel in the future. The Flowers of Evil is his most famous work, but I haven't tried reading it yet. And on the list also is Albert Camus. The Stranger is, of course, a very famous work and is a key existentialist novel. And the final author that I still have to read is Jean-Paul Sartre. He has written Nausea and No Exit, and I must say I've tried reading Nausea and I didn't love it at all, and I gave up, so I didn't finish it. I may try him again, but I felt like I really needed to give him a chance, and I think you should too. And finally, I want to talk to you about a list that I made of key French authors, and I've made a PDF of this list. It's a free printable on my Patreon page, so if you want to go download that, go ahead. So let's go over that list. 1606, Pierre Corneille. 1621, Jean de La Fontaine. 1622, Molière. 1634, Madame de Lafayette. 1639, Jean Racine. 1694, Voltaire. 1712, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. 1713, Denis Diderot. 1740, Marquis de Sade. 1741, Pierre de Laclos. 1748, Montesquieu. 1768, François-René de Chateaubriand. 1780, Charles Nodier. 1783, Stendhal. 1790, Alphonse de Lamartine. 1799, Honoré de Balzac. 1802, Alexandre Dumas. 1802, Victor Hugo. 1804, George Sand. 1821, Charles Baudelaire. 1821, Gustave Flaubert. 1828, Jules Verne. 1840, Émile Zola. 1840, Alphonse Daudet. 1844, Anatole France. 1868, Gaston Leroux. 1869, André Gide. And 1871, Marcel Proust. I hope you have fun discovering French literature. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments down below, and I'm sure that other readers or I myself can help you out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.